I'd like to introduce Michael French. Hello, Michael.
Hi.
And he is the coordinator of the Grounded Community, which is a food growing educational charity based in Boscombe of Bournemouth. And their mission is to work together to give the community access to healthy, nutritious food. So thank you, Michael, for talking to me today. And the first question that I'd love to ask you is, what is the reason that you started growing food?
So my background is very urban. I'm an urbanite from Guildford in Surrey, a skateboarder most of my teenage years, and never ever had an interest in growing food. Not really even in particularly the sort of nature kind of thing, apart from I used to love swinging from trees and doing things like that when I was little. And the only recollection I have being young and growing food was when I went to visit my grandparents in Scotland. They had a little small holding up there and they would grow lots of berries and fruits and things, but absolutely nothing. And then kind of over the last sort of 20 years, I guess, just becoming more and more aware of the environment and impacts, and also just being aware of what I eat and how some of it is just not very good standard, and just questioning that and asking why. And then moving really on from that, I was driving around a council estate I lived on for a while, and had this kind of like daydream thing, which I call it a sort of divine download, but it was kind of just information came into my mind and thinking about food and the systems that we've got. And I felt like there was a real need to learn to grow food, to learn those food growing skills again. The other thing that download told me was about get rid of my bank account and my mortgage as well. So that was an interesting thought process. But the food growing really, it sparked something in me, but I didn't really do anything about it for another 10 years. But in 2014, I was doing some filming about the environment and a bit of environmental campaigning. And I met a guy called Alan who ran a little secret garden in Boscombe, where I was living at the time. And he just inspired me around food growing and nutrition and getting healthy food to people in the community. And so I just started volunteering 2 days a week to be around him and learn lots of different things from him and different people that were here. And that was the beginning of my food growing journey. So having no previous interest or experience, just to turn up and start volunteering a couple of days a week. And that's where it all started for me.
Oh, fantastic. And what made you set up an educational charity?
So I suppose the journey from that point on, from 2014, I spent a couple of years just volunteering here with him and learning to grow. And then we just started realizing that we needed an entity because we were growing a lot of food, but not really having anywhere to put it. So we started giving it to people, giving it to neighbors, but actually we wanted to grow more and more food. So we started an enterprise, and that enterprise tried to support a few other people in like hanging basket businesses, making pallet sunbeds, growing lots of food. And we took over a farm, a big greenhouse in the New Forest. And we grew loads of food in this big 40-meter greenhouse. And I learned a huge amount of skill, taking loads of volunteers over there 3 days a week and growing stuff and bringing it back to market, bringing it back to cafes and food boxes for local people, and spent 3 years doing that. But during that time, I just realized how hard it is to grow food, like on that scale, and how farmers just have a hard time. And those people who are farming and they're having to market it all themselves, get it out to, get up at sort of 4 a.m, harvest stuff, take it to market, be there till the afternoon. It's hard graft. And we weren't really making enough kind of revenue from it to do very much with. I mean, certainly I did 5 years completely unpaid, and just realized that it wasn't that sustainable, or at least what we wanted to do wasn't really being achieved. We were growing some local food, but that was about it. So then we decided actually the better way would be to get lots and lots of people to start to learn to grow their own food and to build that resilience for our community and give people resource and skill so they can grow their own and feed themselves. So that's really what began to happen. And it's what was happening in every volunteer session that we ran at the Secret Garden in Boscombe, teaching people, but it wasn't really happening on a sped up scale. So in 2018-19, we started doing a lot more workshops, training people. And in the beginning of 2020, we became an education charity. And now we've got like 6 part-time people, including an education coordinator who's developing a massive workshop program of food growing skills. This week we've just done a mushroom growing workshop into some logs from a beech tree that fell down outside our garden. And there's loads of just really creative, different things happening, and trying to connect with lots of people like yourself in the community to really push that message out around people growing in their homes, that you can do it. You don't have to be an expert. You don't even have to be skilled and have any experience. You just got to give it a go. And that's really what we're just trying to encourage. So that's where we're at. Yeah.
So clearly you're learning a lot from the community. You know, what else are you learning from the community?
Well, I think that's it. I mean, my background is community youth work, so I'm quite used to the sort of community engagement model. And you've got to listen to people, really. And so I think loads of the time that we've kind of tried stuff and it's gone wrong, or, you know, wanted to do something that hasn't quite worked out the way we planned it. I mean, you know, we spent 3 years in the greenhouse growing stuff. It was a great learning experience, but didn't get us where we wanted to get to. We did a year on a pilot on a car park roof, putting raised beds up there, and that didn't really come to very much, other than we've now got our beehives and a composter up there on the roof of the same place. But you know, you try these things out and you listen to people and you hear what people's interests and kind of passions are, and we work with whoever comes along. So if we get someone who's really into permaculture, we'll start looking at a permaculture element. If we get someone who's really into nature and plants and flowers, we'll start planting more flowers. So anything I know has come from other people that I've been in contact with, and I think that's the mutual learning process that we are always trying to advocate. So yes, we want a workshop, but the better thing about a workshop rather than a lesson is we're not here to tell you everything and how to do it. The workshop is to have a hands-on experience and learn yourself and be able to interact, and someone might have some knowledge to bring to us at the same time we're imparting knowledge to them. So again, even our workshops are a mutual learning experience, and I think that's where the community can really learn from each other. You can learn from your neighbours. Growing on your own and in isolation is not great. And so what we want to encourage, a bit like your guys at Your Planet Doctor, is to get everyone communicating with each other, starting these little groups in their streets or whatever, and growing together and swapping and sharing and learning. That's really what it's all about.
That's right. I mean, it's the only way to do it, isn't it? Working together and you know, empowering people. If you're kind of able to do that, it's wonderful for everyone. It's a win-win. So how do you think the climate is impacting on growing food at the moment?
It's hard to say from a sort of local level that, you know, how the climate really is changing. But I mean, last year, for example, we saw a really long drought season, about probably 6 months with hardly any rain at all, and that was really difficult. So we've immediately gone, right, we need to get loads of water catchment in place in our own irrigation, which we've done this year, and responded like that. I mean, some years we've had frosts stop in March, and other years it's in May. Because I've only really done probably 6 years of growing, or maybe seven now. It's hard for me to say, you know, I haven't had a lifetime of it. I haven't been a farmer that's kind of been out in the fields every year, you know, of my life. So, you know, from that perspective, it's hard to know. But I think globally, we know that the climate is shifting, and what that means is more extremes of temperature. So more extreme dry in the summer, more extreme cold in the winter, more extreme wind. We've definitely seen that. So kind of then our own garden practices have to lend itself to that. So more polytunnel, slightly indoor growing, more sort of netting. Where this year we've had this lockdown, a lot of birds. I have been eating a lot of stuff. I've heard that from a lot of different people. So again, netting stuff is really important at the moment. And just to respond to the nature that's around you, that's changing. And I don't know what it's like for people in other parts of the world, but I do know that like big agriculture and big farmers are creating kind of general food deserts where they're farming in a certain way, and it's really destroying land. And actually that has a massive impact on that. The dry stuff has a massive impact on the carbon emissions, because it kind of bounces off the ground and gives like a hotter experience for the planet. Whereas I do know that if we start to improve our soil across the planet, it will actually sequester carbon and it sucks it down into the earth.
Mm.
And then we can almost like pollute away in a sense, because, you know, the planet will be able to cope with it. But we're kind of doing this thing to it where we're polluting it, and then we're not working with natural systems that then can deal with it. So we're actually killing it on a number of different levels. So locally, improving our soil in our gardens, improving our soil for growing food, using natural methods, allowing the ecosystems around us to come back alive again, is what we're about. So having more bees locally in our urban environments, more kind of biodiversity in people's gardens. You think it doesn't make a difference, but if every single person in the town begins to then improve the biodiversity of their garden, it's going to make a massive difference to our area. And we just don't realize that because we're not connected to it.
And you mean rewilding and things like that, just really letting the wildflowers grow so that
there are some interesting thoughts and words like that. Some people, like, there's this no mow May, where you don't mow your lawn until the end of May because you see what comes up naturally. That's one thing they're doing. Some people are starting to take some of their lawn that they've just kind of made immaculate and big and hardly ever use, and started sectioning it off for food growing and re-landscaping their garden to make it more natural again. So, you know, our trend has very much been concrete the front of your house, lawn the back and nothing else, or deck it all, you know, and have it all pristine that the kids can't even play on it. You know, we're actually, you know, let's get back to having edible forests in our gardens. You know, plant fruit trees in 5 to 7 years will be yielding great produce for our family and our friends and our neighbours. We've already got tons and tons of people in our communities that have fruit trees and have, you know, resource, but don't share it or don't even use it, just let it drop to the ground and it rots in the ground. So I think we can be much more connected and much more in harmony with the things that we have around us, and B, with other people around us that can encourage us and connect us to do that.
Oh, that's just so interesting. Just one more thing I wanted to ask. I mean, you talked about the drought, you talked about the wind. Now, what about all the rain we're getting? And of course, you talked about the farms and the fact that they're so dried out often and they don't absorb the water like they did. And so we get all this flooding. But locally, how do you deal with an awful lot of rain?
Well, I mean, where we're growing in sort of slightly artificial conditions. We're growing in raised beds. So obviously they contain a certain amount of water. And as long as you create drainage for those water beds, there's no good just putting a load of soil in a bed, because it will get waterlogged. So you need a certain amount of kind of stones and things in the bottom to drain through. I mean, we're collecting a lot more rainwater now. We've just bought a load of those big IBCs, I think they're called, the big tank things. We've got those dotted all over our garden now because last year we just ran out of water really and couldn't water fast enough. So we've got that kind of thing. It's just developing what works for you in your space. But I think just recognizing that a lot of water is going to come all at once and then you might not have any for a while. If you want to water with rainwater, which is so much better for the plants than the sort of fluoride bleached tap water that we have. And it really noticed at the farm actually when we were watering with their reservoir rainwater, when we switched to tap water, we had half to even a third of the results that we had with the rainwater.
Really?
I don't know if there are other factors involved in that, but that was certainly apparent those years that we used tap water over rainwater. So I think we'll get better results, and it's really important. Like rainwater has all of those minerals in it as well. It's a more natural source, so it's really good to harness nature and work with nature, and that's what permaculture is really about. Harnessing nature and working with it rather than against it. So it's not to say we shouldn't, do methods like have raised beds, but we need to kind of introduce natural methods, natural composts, natural rainwater into those systems to make them work well.
And I suppose, the added thing to this is that actually this is all great fun, in fact, when you get into it, and wonderful for mental health. It really makes people feel better, doesn't it? Especially in these times where, a lot of people are really suffering and feeling they're losing control because so much is happening to them out there.
Yeah. Well, I think, the biggest fun for me actually is connecting with other people. The actual activity of, digging or troweling or doing whatever else that is.
Mm.
I'd still, if I'm really honest, would say I don't always love it. I do sometimes love, just getting into that rhythm of just doing something and your head switches off,
Mm.
and all of a sudden your brain's somewhere else and you're thinking about things you haven't thought about for years, which is
Yeah.
great, for your own well-being. But I actually really like it when you get someone else sat opposite you on a raised bed, or you
Yeah.
get a neighbour round to your garden doing it, and
Yeah.
you just have a chat. And I've had so many amazing conversations over the last 6 years with people
Yeah.
just sat across a bed, weeding out, digging, and doing your thing, and you just have
Yeah.
a very natural interaction. I think, especially for men, actually, who probably struggle to relate, sort of intense one-to-ones.
Yeah.
When you're doing something like weeding, you can just have a really nice chat about all sorts of things. So
Mm.
I highly recommend weeding with a partner.
Yeah, yeah, and making connections again, just like you say, makes you feel better, doesn't it? And sharing produce like you're doing, and learning new skills, and being out in the open air, and all of it really. A bit of a no-brainer, I think,
Mm.
in every way.
Yeah. So I just lastly really just encourage people, like, if you don't have a garden space, there's probably a community space around you.
Mhm.
You've probably got neighbours who'd really love a hand with their gardens. No one's going to turn around and say, no, I don't want you to help
Yeah.
me weed my lawn, for example, or weed my beds.
Mm.
And you can encourage people around you as well to just start growing something and give it a go, whether it's some potatoes or some carrots or something, relatively simple.
Mm. Mm.
There's so many YouTube tutorials and all sorts of things around at the moment to sort of
No.
get you going. And just start with one or two things and keep it really simple. And don't do what I did first time, which is just plant pepper seeds straight in the ground and expect them to grow, because they won't.
They
You need
don't.
to learn a few little bits.
Oh, well, it's a learning curve, isn't it? But an interesting learning curve. And well, thank you so much, Michael. I could talk to you all day, actually, but I better not. So I'll let you get on, but thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.